The wedding at Hawthorne Hall unfolded beneath a canopy of gold-lit chandeliers and garlands of late-spring roses, yet the splendor only seemed to heighten the sting of being unseen. Guests drifted through the ballroom like jeweled phantoms, exchanging practiced compliments and the kind of smiles that revealed more calculation than warmth. At the far edge of it all stood the forgotten sister, quiet, observant, and painfully aware of how little space society allowed her to occupy. Her gown, softened from years of careful mending, had been fashioned from a dress her sister had outgrown long ago, and though she had stitched it with trembling hope, she now felt its every imperfection beneath the glow of polished candelabras. The musician struck a triumphant chord as the bride entered, her silk skirts sweeping across the marble floor like an announcement of triumph. The room erupted in adoration, and the bride received it with the faint smile of one who believed attention her birthright. She moved with a confidence that only deepened the heroine's sense of invisibility. For months she had prepared herself to smile, to assist, to fade into the background with quiet grace, but she had not prepared for the sharpness of envy that twisted within her chest when she met the glimmer in the eyes of the bridegroom, affection she herself had never been offered. Clusters of elegantly dressed guests began to whisper behind their fans, the hum of their observations floating toward her in fragments. "She will be alone again this season," murmured a woman in emerald silk. "Tragic, really?" Another added with a delicate laugh, "One cannot expect every young lady to be memorable." A pair of gentlemen glanced at her and smirked, their amusement plain. She tried to hold her chin high, but humiliation prickled her skin with each passing remark. The evening's first blow came swiftly. As the bride passed her, radiant and flushed with victory, she paused just long enough to offer a smile glazed with cruelty. "Do try to enjoy yourself," she said sweetly. "I have arranged for you to sit with the children tonight. I thought it best, there would be no pressure to converse." The remark, delivered loudly enough for several guests to hear, landed like a stone in the center of the room. Laughter rippled outward from the nearest tables. Her breath caught, but she forced her expression into stillness. Dignity, she reminded herself, was the only armor left. She slipped toward the terrace before tears could betray her, weaving through crowds that parted without interest or concern. Cool night air greeted her as she stepped outside, heavy with the scent of rain that had not yet fallen. Lanterns flickered along the stone balustrade, casting long shadows across the garden below. She pressed both hands to the carved railing and inhaled shakily, wishing the wind might swallow her entirely. In the muffled revelry behind her, laughter rose again, laughter she could no longer bear. A voice, quiet and deliberate, emerged from the shadows. "You left rather abruptly." She startled, turning toward a figure she had not noticed. A tall man standing at the far end of the terrace, half hidden beneath the overhang of climbing ivy. Moonlight brushed the sharp planes of his face, revealing the unmistakable countenance of the Duke whose reputation both fascinated and intimidated the ton. His presence was like the hush before a storm, powerful, controlled, and unsettlingly observant. She lowered her gaze at once, uncertain whether to speak. He stepped forward, the echo of his boots faint against the stone. "You should not have been spoken to in that manner." Heat flooded her cheeks. "I beg you, my lord, pay it no mind. I am accustomed to misapprehensions." She hated the tremor that slipped into her voice. He studied her silently, a crease of disapproval forming between his brows. Though he was known for a demeanor cold enough to silence entire rooms, his eyes carried something unexpected, an understanding she had never been offered. The weight of his attention felt almost unbearable. "Custom need not dictate what you must endure," he said finally. She shook her head, wishing to retreat into invisibility once more. "If you do not mind, my lord, I should prefer solitude." Her words sounded thin, brittle. She braced herself for the inevitable dismissal. Instead, he moved closer, stopping just within the lantern glow. "Solitude is often a refuge," he replied softly. "But tonight it appears to be a punishment you do not deserve." She looked up, startled by the gentleness beneath his tone. The music from the ballroom swelled behind them, a waltz full of bright triumph she could not share. She wondered what compelled a man of his stature to remain here, speaking with a woman whose society offered him nothing of value. As though reading her thought, he tilted his head. "I observed the exchange," he said, "and the laughter that followed. It was distasteful." Her throat tightened. "I should not have allowed it to trouble me. You should not have been placed in such a position." She laughed softly, bitterly. "My sister enjoys her victories. Then she has poor sport." The remark, delivered with aristocratic disdain, drew an unwilling smile from her. The Duke's gaze sharpened at the sight, as though the curve of her lips revealed something he had not expected. He extended a gloved hand toward her, not touching, merely offering a choice. If you return inside alone, they will continue. If you walk beside me, they will not dare. She stared at him, stunned. The suggestion was outrageous, scandalous, impossible. My lord, she whispered, I cannot feign such intimacy. His voice lowered, gaining a quiet intensity. You would not be pretending anything unseemly. Merely companionship. And if anyone questions it, his eyes held hers with unyielding certainty. They will answer to me. A tremor of something unfamiliar stirred inside her, something like hope, fragile but undeniable. He was offering her dignity, if only for a moment. But accepting his protection could ignite rumors that would cling to her long after the night ended. I do not wish to burden you, she murmured. You would not burden me, he replied. Then, softer still, allow me to lend you the respect they have denied. The music shifted to another waltz, floating out into the night as though urging her to decide. She drew a slow, trembling breath. Perhaps, just this once, she did not need to shrink from the room that had mocked her. She placed her hand lightly upon his arm. The Duke's gaze warmed, imperceptibly yet unmistakably. Together, they stepped toward the glowing ballroom doors, the atmosphere shifting as though the night itself waited to witness what would unfold next. The moment they crossed the threshold back into the ballroom, the transformation was immediate. Conversations faltered, fans hesitated mid-flutter, and 100 eyes shifted toward them with the sharpness of drawn blades. The Duke's presence did not simply command attention, it seized it. Whispers scattered through the hall as swiftly as sparks skittering across dry straw. She felt every breath in the room tighten, as though her very appearance on his arm defied the natural order of society. He moved with composed certainty, guiding her through the sea of startled guests. Though his touch was formal, his presence beside her created a shield stronger than steel. The murmurs began at once, low but unmistakable. Why her? Gasped a woman burdened by diamonds. What business does he have escorting that one? Muttered a gentleman whose envy leaked through every syllable. Her pulse thundered in her ears, though she strove to keep her steps steady. The Duke's pace was unhurried, deliberate, as though escorting her was an ordinary courtesy rather than an act bold enough to rattle half the county. He paused near the center of the room, giving the impression he had chosen this spot precisely to make his intentions impossible to ignore. I believe you wished for a seat, he murmured quietly. She nodded, though each breath felt thin. Before she could speak, a servant approached bearing a silver tray. Atop it lay a silk handkerchief embroidered with the unmistakable crest of his house. The servant bowed solemnly. His Grace instructed that this be delivered. Her heart lurched. The Duke accepted the handkerchief and offered it to her with the gentlest inclination of his head. The gesture, though small, carried the weight of public claim. Such a token, publicly given, could ignite a scandal far hotter than the whispers already swirling. My lord, she breathed, barely audible, this is too much. It is precisely appropriate, he replied. You deserve nothing less. She hesitated, but refusing would draw even more notice. She accepted the token, her fingers trembling. A hush rippled across the hall like a breeze through tall grass. Then came the sharp intake of breath, the widening of eyes, shock, disbelief, envy. The air seemed to tremble with the force of gathered speculation. Her sister, resplendent in silk and adorned with the triumphant glow of a bride, observed the scene with a stiffening jaw. Though she tried to mask her fury with a polite smile, cracks formed with each passing second. Her new husband shifted awkwardly beside her, discomfort seeping through his formal posture. Attempts at civility barely contained the bride's ire. She approached with a sweetness so brittle it seemed ready to shatter. How unexpected, she murmured, her voice honeyed with resentment. I had not realized you sought such distinguished company this evening. Before the heroine could respond, a gentleman stepped forward, a former suitor who had once courted her with more arrogance than sincerity. His smirk carried the satisfaction of impending cruelty. Your Grace, he said with mocking bow, you are generous indeed. Some might call your attentions charitable. A few guests tittered behind their hands. Humiliation tightened around her like a noose. She opened her mouth to speak, but the Duke's voice cut through the air, composed yet icily direct. I do not extend charity, he said, every syllable precise. Only respect where it is deserved. The room fell utterly silent. Even the orchestra seemed unsure whether to continue. The gentleman's smirk faltered, dissolving into a stiff grimace. The bride's forced composure cracked. Her mother, seated nearby, pressed a hand to her chest as though warding off faintness brought on by scandal. Color burned along the heroine's throat. The Duke's words, spoken with such unwavering sincerity, swept through her with a force both terrifying and thrilling. He had defended her, not with anger but with dignity, and society had heard it. The whispers resumed, but now they carried a different timbre. "Respect?" murmured a dowager at the front table. He spoke of her with respect. Another woman leaned toward her companion. "Surely he does not intend," she cut herself off before finishing the thought, as though afraid of giving it oxygen. The Duke bent his arm in silent invitation. "Shall we take a walk? The air in here grows stifling." She nodded, allowing him to guide her toward the far side of the ballroom. With every step, the weight of speculation deepened, but no one dared impede their path. She felt the shift as clearly as she felt the silk of his sleeve beneath her fingertips. She was no longer a subject of ridicule but an anomaly, a riddle no one could solve. They stopped beside a row of tall windows framed by velvet drapes. Moonlight streamed through them, mingling with the warm glow of chandeliers. She felt the intensity of his gaze and dared, for a moment, to meet it. "You need not fear their whispers," he said quietly. "I do not fear them," she replied, though her voice betrayed uncertainty. "But I do not understand your kindness." He considered her for a moment. "Is kindness so foreign to you?" The question struck deeper than she cared to admit. "I am unaccustomed to such attention." "Then let this be the first of many lessons," he said. "You are to accept what you are owed." Before she could formulate a response, the jealous gentleman returned, nursing wounded pride. "Your Grace," he said with feigned politeness, "forgive my earlier boldness. But surely you cannot deny this." He gestured toward her with a sweeping flourish. "Seems rather sudden." The Duke regarded him without a flicker of emotion. "Some matters require no time at all for clarity." "And what matter is this?" the gentleman pressed. The Duke's reply was swift, controlled, and devastating. "The matter," he said, "of treating a lady with the respect she is long overdue." Gasps fluttered across the room like startled birds. The gentleman paled, stumbling backward, defeated not by anger but by the Duke's calm precision. Humiliation no longer belonged to her. It had been returned neatly and rightfully to those who had earned it. The bride, watching from across the room, clutched her bouquet with knuckles white as bone. Her triumph had cracked. Her sister's quiet dignity had risen in its place. As the Duke turned back to her, the world narrowed to the space between them. "If you wish," he said softly, "tonight need not be the end of this." Before she could answer, the music shifted once more, a waltz swelling with promise. The night was far from over, and the path ahead, dangerous, scandalous, intoxicating, had only begun to unfurl. The storm announced itself with a distant growl, a low tremor that shivered through the glass windows as though nature itself sought entry to the ballroom. Lightning flickered beyond the velvet drapes, casting momentary flashes across the polished floor and the startled faces of guests still whispering about the Duke's escort. The air had grown heavy, dense with the scent of approaching rain and the weight of unspoken questions. When the Duke bent slightly toward her and murmured, "You must be weary of inspection. Come, let us find quieter surroundings," she felt both relief and hesitation entwine within her chest. He led her toward a corridor draped in shadow, away from the glittering swirl of dancers. No one dared block their path. They reached a conservatory at the far end of the hall, a structure of glass and iron where moonlight spilled freely and the world seemed to breathe differently. The moment they stepped inside, the first raindrops struck the panes with a soft, steady rhythm, as though pacing their breaths. The Duke closed the door behind them, muffling the orchestra's distant melody. Lanterns glowed low along the walls, illuminating rows of ferns and delicate blossoms arranged with careful artistry. She felt small amid such beauty, yet strangely at peace. The storm intensified outside, creating a symphony of rain against glass. "I hope you do not mind the isolation," he said, his tone gentler than before. "This room has always offered me respite from society's relentless stare." She brushed her fingers along the edge of a marble table, steadying her breath. "Isolation suits me better than a room full of scrutiny." He watched her quietly. "You bore their cruelty with admirable composure." Her composure splintered the moment he said it. "I did not feel admirable," she admitted softly. "I felt ashamed, foolish even, as though I had stepped into the room already marked for ridicule." "You were not the fool," he said firmly. "Those who mocked you revealed their own smallness." She swallowed hard, feeling emotion gather at the base of her throat. I have spent years trying to shrink myself so I would not invite such attention. Yet somehow I invite it anyway. That is because they sense gentleness, he replied, and mistake it for weakness. The storm cracked loudly above them, making her flinch. He stepped closer, concern flickering in his gaze. Forgive the intrusion. Does thunder unsettle you? Only when I am already unsettled, she confessed, attempting a faint smile. If you feel such, you have earned the right, he murmured. Silence expanded between them, filled with the rainfall's cadence. She felt the warmth of his presence, his steadiness, as if he anchored the room itself. Without intending to, she spoke again, words drawn from depths she rarely let surface. I have never been chosen, she whispered. Not for companionship, nor affection, nor anything of value. My family regards me as an obligation. Suitors offer courtesy only when others are watching. And tonight, when my sister mocked me, her voice faltered. I was angry not at her, but at myself for expecting something better. A sharp breath escaped him, almost imperceptible. You expected kindness. That is no sin. She shook her head. Hope is dangerous, my lord. It makes a fool of me. His expression shifted, the cool austerity softening with something that looked almost like sorrow. I know that feeling too well. She turned toward him slowly. Lightning revealed the hard line of his jaw, the faint shadows beneath his eyes, signs of a man more burdened than feared. You, she murmured. But you are. Alone, he finished quietly. Far more often than any man ought to be. She hesitated. Is it by choice? In part. He moved to stand beside a glass pane streaked with rain, his silhouette etched against the storm. My late wife was gentle. Too gentle for the demands placed upon her. Society praised her beauty, her grace, her perfect adherence to expectations, even as she withered beneath them. I failed to shield her. When illness claimed her, they mourned her in words but not in heart. And I learned to distrust every smile offered in my direction. Her breath stilled. She had not expected such vulnerability, not from a man the world described as stone and ice. I am sorry, she whispered. I do not seek pity, he replied. Only understanding. I retreat from the world not because I fear it, but because I fear what it demands of those I care for. And yet you stepped into danger tonight by standing with me, she said softly. He turned toward her, rain-lit shadows deepening his expression. I did not weigh danger. I saw injustice. And I saw you, dignified despite cruelty, gracious despite humiliation. I recognized something I had not seen in years. She felt her pulse quicken. What did you recognize? Courage, he said simply. Yours is quiet but unmistakable. Her eyes lowered. If courage existed in me tonight, it was borrowed. Borrowed from whom? You, she admitted. A silence stretched, delicate as the space between two hands about to meet. The Duke's features softened with something unspoken. It was not my strength you felt, he said. It was your own reflected. Thunder rolled above them, though softer this time, as though even the storm listened to the quiet unfolding between them. She reached out unconsciously, touching the edge of a nearby fern to steady her trembling fingers. He noticed, stepping closer. Not enough to startle her, but enough to let warmth bridge the space between them. Have I overstepped? He asked, voice low. No, she breathed. You have done only what no one else has ever done. And what is that? You have seen me. The word struck him visibly. For a long moment, neither moved. Raindrops slid down the glass behind him, tracing paths like falling stars. Their hands brushed, not entirely by accident, not entirely by design. The slight contact pulsed through her like a heartbeat. He did not pull away. Tell me, he murmured, if pretending has become something more than pretense. Her breath trembled. I do not know what it has become. Only that I do not wish it to end. The lanterns flickered as the storm pressed closer, yet within the conservatory the air felt warm, suspended, transformed. He lifted her hand slowly, reverently, as though granting her permission to hope again. Then, with quiet solemnity, he said, Then let it be the beginning. When they emerged from the conservatory, the storm had softened only enough to allow the music and voices of the ballroom to regain their dominance. Yet something essential had shifted between them, something fragile and luminous, like a lantern newly lit in a dark hallway. She walked at the Duke's side not as a shadow, nor as one seeking protection, but as a woman standing within the gravity of a man who had chosen to see her. Still, the return to society's gaze tightened every breath she drew. The ballroom was no longer merely a space of polished marble and glittering chandeliers. It was an arena bristling with anticipation. Guests who had nearly forgotten the scandal of the earlier hour were instantly revived by the sight of them emerging together. Fans snapped open with audible intensity. Men leaned toward one another, muttering behind gloved hands. Every gesture, every glance, became a fresh spark tossed into rising flames of speculation. She felt the shift at once. The scrutiny, the suspicion, the envy. Her instinct was to ease her hand from the Duke's arm, to retreat before the building tempest of whispers overtook them both. But the Duke's arm remained steady beneath her touch, a quiet reassurance that he did not intend to let her slip away into invisibility again. "If you wish to withdraw," he murmured, sensing her hesitation, "say the word." "I do not wish to run," she replied, though fear pressed hard against her ribs. "But I fear I am drawing you into unnecessary trouble." "Trouble," he said, "is a word that describes inconvenience. You are not an inconvenience." His words steadied her breath, until a sharp, familiar voice sliced through the murmuring crowd. "There you are." Her sister swept toward them, satin skirts swirling like the wake of a ship slicing through turbulent water. Her expression was a flawless mask of bridal serenity, but her eyes glittered with the fury of a cornered predator. At her side stood their mother, lips pressed into a line of thinly veiled displeasure. "You left the celebration without a word," the bride said, her tone sweetened with bitterness. "One might think you wished to draw attention away from my wedding." The accusation lodged in her chest. Before she could respond, their mother added, "It appears you have succeeded in attracting more attention than is appropriate. His Grace has been unusually generous." The bride's gaze sharpened. "Embarrassments reflect upon the entire family. You will return to your proper place at once." Proper place. The word struck with old, familiar cruelty. She opened her mouth, though she did not know whether to apologize or defend herself, but the Duke stepped forward, a silent wall between her and their scorn. "Madam," he said to the bride, "I believe you misunderstand the situation." Her sister's smile faltered. "Do I?" "Yes," he replied, with a calm that carried the weight of authority. "Your sister has conducted herself with dignity, despite being treated with a lack of courtesy unbecoming of this household." A visible jolt ran through the nearby guests. The mother stiffened, instinctively glancing toward the listening crowd. Her sister's voice sharpened. "Are you suggesting impropriety on our part, Your Grace?" "I am stating," he said, "that no lady should be spoken to as she has been this evening." Heat rose in her cheeks, not the heat of shame, but the bewildering warmth of being defended so openly. Still, she feared the consequences. "My lord," she whispered, touching his arm, "please, there is no need." "There is every need," he said quietly to her, though the room could hear his words. "Do not shrink from truth." Her sister's cheeks flamed. "If she has entangled you with false modesty, that is hardly our fault." The Duke's expression hardened. "She has entangled no one. It is I who sought her company." A gasp rippled through the hall. Someone dropped a fan. A servant stumbled, nearly losing his grip on a tray of champagne glasses. Her mother sputtered, "Your Grace, please, such statements can be misinterpreted." "Then allow me to speak more plainly," he said, turning to face the entire wedding party, his voice carrying the sharp clarity of a command. "If fault must be found, place it upon me. I am the one who asked for her presence. I am the one who offered her my arm. And I am the one who finds this treatment of her wholly unacceptable." For a heartbeat, even the storm outside seemed to hold its breath. The bride's fury trembled beneath her skin, barely contained. "You disgraced this evening with your insinuations." "No, madam," the Duke replied. "I bring clarity." Whispers erupted with renewed violence. "He defends her. He chose her. Does he intend?" She felt faint. The weight of their stares, the swirl of accusations, the sharp sting of family betrayal, it all rushed toward her like a collapsing wave. "I cannot allow this to continue," she said softly, stepping away from him. "My lord, please. I will not be the cause of your disgrace. Let me withdraw." He caught her hand before she could retreat, his touch firm but gentle. "You are not to bear that burden alone." Her sister hissed, "For heaven's sake, stop indulging this farce." The Duke's eyes turned glacier cold. "It is no farce, madam." Then to her, only to her, he said, "Walk with me." Her heart thudded. "But where?" "Away from this place," he answered, his gaze steady. "You should not remain where you are not valued." The simple truth of it struck something deep within her. For years she had endured neglect as though it were her natural lot. But tonight, beneath the scrutiny of the world and the thunder of the storm, A door had opened, one she never imagined stepping through. Still she hesitated. "If I leave with you now, the scandal will be irrevocable." "Yes," he said. "But so will the respect." He offered his arm. Not as a shield. Not as pity. As a choice. She placed her hand upon it. A murmur surged through the entire gathering like a rush of wind through tall grass. Astonishment, disbelief, envy. The bride looked ready to tear the hall apart. Their mother collapsed into a chair with theatrical despair. The Duke inclined his head politely to the room, then turned toward the grand entrance. The crowd parted in stunned silence. The music faltered, then died entirely. Chandeliers flickered as the storm rolled nearer, shadows stretching across the marble like liquid night. They stepped into the rain-soaked doorway. Lantern lights spilled across the Duke's shoulders as he turned to her with a quiet question in his eyes. "Do you regret this?" he asked. She drew in a trembling breath, feeling the storm wind brush her cheeks like the whisper of a new beginning. "No," she said. "Not tonight." He offered his cloak. She accepted. Together they walked into the storm. Rain swept across the carriage windows in silvery sheets, each drop catching the lantern glow as though the night itself were scattering fragments of shaken stars. Inside, the dim light flickered over her face, illuminating traces of uncertainty mixed with the fragile steadiness she had gathered since leaving the ballroom. The Duke sat across from her, silent yet wholly attentive, as if every shift in her breath carried meaning he refused to ignore. The steady rhythm of the wheels softened the storm's roar, creating a cocoon between them that felt strangely intimate, suspended from the world's harsh judgment. Though she had walked beside him without hesitation, the tremor in her chest refused to settle. "You have risked your reputation," she said softly. "And for what? To defend a woman who—" "Do not finish that sentence," he said, his voice quiet but firm. "Not tonight. Not when you have shown more courage than anyone in that hall." She looked down, fingers tightening on the cloak he had wrapped around her shoulders. "I have shown nothing of the sort. I simply could not bear to stand alone any longer." "A person does not choose to be alone," he replied. "They are placed there by others." He paused, his gaze steady. "But tonight you reached for what you were denied. That is courage whether you see it or not." The carriage slowed as it turned onto the long tree-lined drive leading to his estate. Lanterns glowed faintly among the branches, lighting the path in a soft, golden procession. When the carriage stopped, he stepped out first, offering his hand. She hesitated only a moment before taking it, feeling the solid warmth of his fingers close around hers. His estate rose before them in shadowed grandeur, its stone archways lit by a few carefully placed lanterns. Rain pattered softly upon the roof, a muted accompaniment to the quiet tension between them. He led her through the entrance hall, past portraits and tapestries, until they reached a long gallery illuminated by a row of tall windows. Candles burned low in the sconces, casting warm halos over the paintings lining the walls. "This room," he said, guiding her inside, "is one I have not shown to anyone in some time." She stepped forward slowly, her gaze drifting toward the largest portrait at the end of the hall. It showed a serene woman seated beside a window, her expression gentle yet touched by sorrow. The late Duchess. The air thickened with reverence as she studied the painting. "She was loved," the heroine whispered. He nodded. "Very much. And for a long time after her passing, I believed every door to my heart had closed with her." His voice softened, carrying the weight of years he had never spoken aloud. "I feared that to care again would be to open the way for loss." She turned toward him, her voice barely audible. "And do you still fear it?" He hesitated, not from uncertainty, but from the gravity of what he intended to reveal. "I fear many things," he said. "But losing the chance to know you, I fear that more." The candlelight trembled across his features, highlighting the truthfulness in his eyes. She felt her breath catch. "My lord," she whispered, "you assume more bravery in me than exists." He stepped closer, but not so close as to overwhelm her. "Then let us speak plainly. Tonight the world jeered at you. Your family humiliated you. Yet you chose to step into the storm rather than allow them to dictate your worth." His gaze searched hers with careful sincerity. "Tell me that is not bravery." Tears pricked her eyes, not of shame but of something deeper, more powerful. "I only walked because you stood beside me." "And I stood," he replied, "because you walked." The truth of it hung between them, a fragile thread woven of mutual recognition. She lifted a hand toward the portrait, her voice soft. "I cannot replace her." "I would never ask you to," he said. "Nor would I wish it. You are not a substitute for a memory. You are a promise of something new. Her breath trembled at the word promise. For so long, she had imagined herself unworthy of anything resembling one. She turned fully toward him, the rain tapping against the windows in measured cadence. What is it you seek from me? He drew nearer, though still leaving space for her to choose. A beginning, he said. Not an answer tonight, nor a declaration bound by haste or fear. Only permission to hope. Hope. A word that had once felt distant now pulsed with warmth. She stepped closer, close enough to meet his quiet intensity with her own. And what do you hope for? That you might allow me to return tomorrow. His voice deepened with earnest restraint. To call upon you properly. To court you with the dignity you were denied. To earn whatever affection you may one day offer. Emotion swept through her, astonishment, gratitude, and the unmistakable stir of something tender, something she had not dared to consider possible. She lifted her gaze to his, steady despite the storm inside her. You would court a woman whom society dismisses? I would court the woman who walked beside me into the rain, he said, and who did not regret it. The gallery seemed to brighten, though no candle had changed. She felt a slow, blossoming warmth unfurl in her chest. For the first time in years, she believed her heart might hold something more than loneliness. I will not pretend to understand why you have chosen me, she murmured, but I cannot deny what I felt tonight. He stepped nearer still, his voice a low promise. Then tell me, she drew in a steady breath, that when you defended me I felt seen for the first time in my life. And when you asked if I regretted leaving with you, I realized I had not regretted a single step. His expression softened with profound relief. Then let this be our truth, he said. Not the whispers of those who abandon their kindness, nor the judgments of those who hide behind propriety. And if they whisper tomorrow, she asked. Then they shall whisper, he answered. But they will whisper about a woman I intend to honor. Silence settled around them, warm and steady. She realized she no longer trembled. The storm continued outside, but within the gallery the air felt still, protective, hopeful. He lifted her hand gently, brushing his lips across her knuckles, a gesture filled with reverence rather than urgency. I will return in the morning, he said quietly, if you permit it. Her answer came without tremor. I will be waiting. And in that moment, beneath flickering candlelight and the echoing rhythm of rain, the world no longer felt divided between cruelty and solitude. It felt new, wide, uncertain, but blooming with possibility, held steady by the hand of a duke who had chosen to begin again.